As a fan of the 90s Iron Man animated series, watching Iron Man movie was a very interesting experience. Before the movie, my only real exposure to the character was through the animated show. So I was catching episodes of Tony Stark as he took on the Mandarin, while struggling his billionaire genius persona. There was also his little cameo in Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, which was my very first introduction to the character. And then I was also catching some of the Iron Man comic adverts, which were shown in the Marvel comic media throughout the 80s and the 90s. Now, unlike Spider-Man or the X-Men, whose comics and media adaptations were everywhere, Iron Man felt more like a niche character. I never really read the comics properly, so my understanding of him was largely shaped by what I saw in the animated series. The sleek armor, the high-tech gadgets, and the concept of a hero powered by his own ingenuity were so fascinating. But the character didn't feel as prominent as Marvel's other heavy hitters at the time. And that's why Iron Man was such a revelation. It took what I remembered from the show, the genius inventor, the cool suits, and the technology-driven action, and elevated it to a cinematic level. Robert Downey Jr. brought a depth and swagger to Tony Stark that I'd never quite seen before, making the character feel a bit more grounded and charismatic. The Mark I sequence especially hit home, showing how Stark could literally build his way out of any situation. For someone whose memories with Iron Man were just limited to the cartoon and the odd comic book appearance here and there, seeing him become the face of the Marvel Cinematic Universe was unexpected and very interesting. It made me appreciate how far the character had come, and in the process turned me into an even bigger fan than I ever imagined. So much so that I went on to collect the 40 Years of Iron Man collection CD. Now, I've read some of the comics, and I like the arc when Rhodey takes over the mantle of Iron Man whilst Tony went on to deal with his alcohol issues. Now, I actually watched the Avengers movie before I watched this Iron Man movie, and it was here that I experienced Tony Stark's charismatic personality and brilliance within the ensemble cast of the Avengers before I went back to watch his origin story. So watching Iron Man afterwards was like uncovering the missing puzzle piece and explained how Stark became the hero that we all know. And this run of movies took him, along with Captain America and Thor, from B, C-listers to A-listers. Now, in recent movie retrospectives, I tend to do a short summary of the movie from start to finish. So I'm going to go with a different approach this time around. So what I will do is give a small plot overview followed by some of the key points throughout the movie. So the plot overview. The movie follows Tony Stark, a genius billionaire, playboy and weapons manufacturer, who undergoes a life-changing transformation after he was kidnapped by terrorists and forced to confront the consequences of his technology. After experiencing all this, Stark becomes the superhero Iron Man, and this marks the start of the MCU. So some of the key points and the best moments. Here we go. The movie begins with a bang as Stark is ambushed in Afghanistan whilst demonstrating the Jericho missile. The attack is explosive and it sets the tone for the high stakes of the film. While held captive by the Ten Rings terrorist group, Stark meets Hoyosin, a fellow prisoner and doctor who saves his life by implementing an electromagnet to keep his shrapnel away from the heart, which occurred during the explosion and the attack. This section is pivotal as Stark builds the Mark I armor in secret and he crafts it from scraps and then he's able to escape. The tension as the terrorists close in, just as opposed to Stark hammering away in the workshop, it's a very thrilling sequence and the start of his journey from greedy weapons manufacturer to hero. The Mark I's armor's first use is electrifying, watching Stark clumsily but powerfully navigate his way out of the cave and incinerate his enemies with his flamethrowers and fly on to safety. Just barely though. I think this is one of the film's more memorable sequences. The Mark I escape, it's raw and unpolished and showing Stark's ingenuity under pressure. The clunky makeshift armor makes it feel grounded and gritty, and it takes you on a journey with its escape, starting with the makeshift armor to what we saw with the final Mark III suit. After returning to the US, Stark shocks the world by announcing that Stark Industries will no longer be manufacturing weapons. This moment signals his moral awakening and sets the stage for his evolution, whilst also revealing who the main antagonist is. Building the Mark II armor. The montage of Stark developing and testing the Mark II armor in his lab is a fan favorite. The humor like the failed flight test and the awe of seeing the sleek silver suit for the first time are truly amazing to watch. The completed Mark III armor, red and gold, debuts in spectacular fashion. Stark takes it for a test flight, soaring above Malibu and into the atmosphere. The exhilarating thrill of this scene perfectly captures his newfound freedom and power. This scene is awe-inspiring and signals the birth of a modern-day superhero. Iron Man was, as I said earlier, considered B, C-list, not on the level of the X-Men or Spider-Man, but with this movie and this transformation, you can't deny it now. Iron Man is top tier. Attack on Gulmara. Stark's first mission as Iron Man is fun to see. He's in the Mark III suit and he flies to Gulmara, the village Yinsen's family is from, to rescue the innocent people from the Ten Rings. The precision of this targeting system and the brutal efficiency of the suit makes the scene fun to watch. Obadiah Stane, aka Ironmonger. Stark's mentor and Stark Industries partner Obadiah Stane is revealed to be behind Stark's kidnapping. Stane's betrayal is chilling, especially when he uses a device to paralyze Stark and then steal his arc reactor. The scene when he reveals himself to Pepper Potts in particular is very intense and intimidating. The climatic fight between Tony in the Mark III suit and Obadiah Stane in the bulky Ironmonger suit. It's a true highlight. The stakes are personal and the battle showcases Stark's resourcefulness as he outsmarts his more powerful opponent. The scene is very well done, I believe, very action oriented, with Stark triumphing over his former mentor turned enemy. Now Pepper's role in overloading the arc reactor to help Stark defeat Obadiah Stane adds some emotional depth to the scene, and it reinforces their growing bond as they later go on to become a couple. The film ends with Stark holding a press conference and the movie took on a whole new direction. Instead of going down the route of the comics where he kept his identity a secret, Tony does something very different and he reveals himself to the world with the unforgettable line,
"I am Iron Man."
This line is legendary. It cements Tony's swagger and it sets the tone for future MCU films. This was his big redemption arc, watching him transition from a selfish weapons manufacturer to a selfless hero determined to use his weapons for good. In the post-credits scene, Tony gets a visit from Nick Fury, played by the legendary Samuel L. Jackson. He's looking to kickstart a new program, the introduction of the Avengers Initiative, teasing a possible interconnected universe. And at the end of this movie, with its success and teasing the possibility of other heroes to join in, the MCU was really beginning to take shape here. Iron Man is a masterclass in superhero origin storytelling. The film balances its intense action with humor and heartfelt moments. From the gritty realism of Stark's escape in the Mark I armor to the sleek, polished transformation into the man we know as Iron Man, the movie delivers unforgettable moments that set the foundation for the MCU. The heart and soul of this film is obviously, without a doubt, Robert Downey Jr. His portrayal of Tony Stark / Iron Man is widely considered to be one of the most beloved performances in modern cinema, and many believe that he was just simply born to play the role. The belief stems from the striking parallels between Downey's personal life and Tony Stark's character arc, combined with his unmatched charisma and his depth as an actor. Both Downey and Tony Stark experienced very public downfalls followed by remarkable comebacks. Downey faced legal issues and substance abuse problems in the 1990s and the early 2000s, but he managed to turn his life around, and he's mirroring Stark's transformation from a reckless playboy to a selfless hero. Tony Stark's charm, wit and arrogance are central to his character, and Downey naturally embodies these traits, with Downey bringing a personal touch to Tony Stark, infusing the character with his own real-life experiences and perspectives. His real-life eccentricities, his confidence and vulnerability blend seamlessly with Tony Stark's genius billionaire persona. His ability to make a flawed character likable was crucial in making Iron Man a very beloved figure. Now, when Downey was cast in Iron Man, it was a very bold move by Marvel Studios given his troubled background. Downey was also at a crossroads in his career. He was either going to take this role and make the most of it, or be confined to the waste bin of what ifs. However, his performance not only anchored the film, but it also set the tone for the entire MCU, becoming its heart and soul, and in turn making him one of the most bankable stars in Hollywood. He has become so synonymous with the character that it's going to be very difficult to imagine anyone else in this role. Whomever is cast in future Iron Man films, they're going to have a very, very tough act to follow. Robert Downey Jr. may be the lead of the movie, but he had an ensemble cast built around him, with everybody involved playing their parts to help with the success of this movie. Terrence Howard. Howard's performances were grounded and charismatic, with moments hinting at Rhodey's future as War Machine, like the famous
Next time, baby.
when he looks at Stark's suit. Howard's portrayal showed potential for a strong and complex dynamic with Tony Stark, which blended loyalty with a willingness to challenge Stark's reckless behavior. I was personally looking forward to him appearing next time in the War Machine suit, but as we all know, that did not happen. Reports suggested that Howard was initially the highest paid actor in Iron Man, earning more than RDJ, as Downey was in the process of rebuilding his career at that moment in time. When Marvel Studios renegotiated contracts for Iron Man 2, they reportedly offered Howard a very significant pay cut, allegedly due to creative and financial decisions. Howard did say in interviews afterwards that he felt undervalued and disrespected, and this all led to his departure. He was replaced with the talented veteran actor Don Cheadle. He brought a more understated and pragmatic approach to the character. Now, I personally would have loved to have seen Terrence given a chance to grow with the character, but that was just the way the ball bounced. Who knows, maybe in a future multiverse movie we could see Howard reprise his role, but then again, with the recent multiverse chapter of the MCU being less than stellar, barring Spider-Man, No Way Home and Deadpool and Wolverine, yeah, that might not happen. Gwyneth Paltrow, she plays Tony's personal assistant and would-be love interest, Pepper Potts. She plays a character who's very sophisticated, smart and level-headed, and is there with Tony from after he first escapes the Afghanistan prison. Now in the comic books, Pepper gets married to Happy Hogan, who's Tony's best friend and bodyguard, so this was a different departure here as she eventually ends up as Tony's wife. Jeff Bridges plays the chief villain of the story, Obadiah Stane. He is Stark's second in command of Stark Enterprises as well as his mentor and friend. However, it turns out that Stane had an agenda of his own, to be rid of Stark and to take over the company for his own nefarious means. His portrayal was considered to be decent if not a bit one-dimensional without a lot of character depth, but he had his moments where he can be quite conniving and convincing, and in some scenes very intimidating. Now, a fact for this role, several of Obadiah Stane's scenes were cut so the movie could focus more on RDJ's Tony. The writers felt that the approach of less is more was a better narrative for the character. Now, this in hindsight is probably why Bridges' portrayal of Stane was seen in the eyes of many as decent if unspectacular. Jon Favreau, he plays Happy Hogan, Tony Stark's bodyguard and close friend and head of security for Stark Industries. Hogan is later assigned by Stark as head of asset management for the Avengers. His portrayal in this movie is more of a sidekick with some comic relief. There was plenty of history for Hogan from the comics that isn't really addressed here or in other Marvel movies, like him actually marrying Pepper Potts, and in an alternate universe he became the Freak, as we saw in episode 3 of Marvel's What If. Here, he's just mostly a sidekick character. Paul Bettany, he voices Jarvis, Stark's personal AI system. He will later go on to play Vision in the MCU, starting with the Avengers movie Age of Ultron. Clark Gregg appears as Agent Phil Coulson of S.H.I.E.L.D., whose role within the MCU would go on to become bigger as he went on to star in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show. Rounding off the cast of characters is someone who has an uncredited cameo in the movie, Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury. He appears in the post-end credits scene where he meets with Stark to talk about a project known as the Avengers Initiative. As we all know, this was the planting of the seeds which would lead to the formation of the Avengers. So this movie, Iron Man played a pivotal role in setting up what would be known as the MCU, with a string of world-building movies to raise up individual characters before bringing them together in one big ensemble. Iron Man earned an amazing worldwide gross of $585.8 million. In its opening weekend, Iron Man grossed over $98.6 million in 4,105 theaters in the US and Canada, ranking first at the box office and giving it the 11th biggest opening weekend at the time, and the third highest grossing opening weekend of 2008, behind Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and The Dark Knight. Iron Man had the second best premiere for a non-sequel behind Spider-Man and the fourth opening for a superhero film. Given the very stiff competition with Spider-Man and Batman, two of the most popular superheroes of all time, Iron Man more than held his own and showed that he could compete with the main powerhouses. Now, on a personal note, my introduction to the MCU as a whole is a little backwards. I was not really into the big three of Iron Man, Cap and Thor in the MCU. Iron Man for me was just about the 90s animated show, and that was it. I was more into the Fox X-Men movies and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man trilogy. The Thor and Cap movies I largely ignored. I did like the characters, but I just wasn't as into them. and it was by chance that with some work colleagues we went to watch the very first Avengers movie back in 2012, and this was my first real introduction to this universe, and I thoroughly enjoyed the movie, and then I went back to watch the previous movies, with Iron Man being the first. In retrospect, it made me appreciate the role of the big three a lot more, and the success of their movies took the characters, as I said earlier, from C, B-listers to A-list, and they all stemmed from this movie. So without the success of Iron Man, there is no Avengers and there is no MCU. Iron Man stood out for a number of reasons. The groundbreaking vision. Now, unlike the standalone nature of the Fox X-Men and the Fantastic Four films and Sony's Spider-Man trilogy, Iron Man began a shared universe, something never before attempted in cinema. Kevin Feige had taken the comic book approach of having several characters within a shared universe who would then go off to their own separate adventures before coming together in a big team-up movie. A new tone for superhero films. Iron Man blended humor, heart and grounded action in a way that felt fresh. The film struck a balance between grittiness and comic book fun, and this paved the way for the MCU's signature tone, and in the process created an incredible legacy. And while the Fox and Sony films were successful in their own right, they remained largely confined to their respective characters' world with no crossover whatsoever. Marvel Studios' vision started with Iron Man, and it was to weave multiple characters into a single narrative tapestry, culminating in the Avengers. And then there was multiple appearances from Marvel characters across the MCU outside of the Avengers, so the tone and the feeling of a shared universe was very consistent and a key feature for MCU movies. Many would say the success of the MCU made characters like Black Panther, the Guardians of the Galaxy, and Doctor Strange from unknown to A-listers. Now, finishing up my video on Iron Man, over time, Iron Man has become one of my favourite MCU films, and it's most definitely my favourite of the Iron Man trilogy, and of the big four of Iron Man, Captain America, Hulk and Thor. I would rank this as number 3, with Captain America Civil War and Winter Soldier just ahead of it. It told a great origin story about a playboy billionaire caring only about his selfish needs until a life-changing event occurred with his kidnapping and the realization that his selfish deeds only exacerbate a deep-rooted problem of weapons of mass destruction, causing further damage to society. So this was him turning his life around and becoming Iron Man. The movie is very nicely paced and things don't feel necessarily rushed. There are great special effects, tense moments, great action sequences, and just an unexpected fun all-round movie that was the first building block to what would become a juggernaut of a universe. One of the best films in the MCU and the top 20 film in the pantheon of superhero movies.